Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, September the 22nd. And welcome to our commentary. A couple of more thoughts about the Kirk Memorial Service, and then we'll move on to other topics. Look, I think we've reached the point after that incredible speech by Erica Kirk, where I think it's time to move on and let the family grieve, let the widow and those kids grieve. Obviously, we have to support them as much as we can. Um, do whatever we can, but they're going to have plenty of financial support. That's not really going to be their challenge. I think the biggest challenge is, of course, what she now has to do, which is to raise those two kids. The youngest one being not even a year old, I believe, and the young girl who's about 3. She's going to have to do that by herself. And that's going to be quite a challenge. That's going to be quite a challenge for this young mother and this young widow. And that's where I think the focus should be on our side. Let's see what we can do to support her emotionally so that she can be as comfortable as you can be after such an amazing experience like this, where, your husband is shot while he's speaking. So that's where I think we need to be coming from. Obviously, the organization will continue, especially now that she was named the CEO, and I'm sure she's going to be doing a lot to promote the organization. It's obviously very important for her to keep the memory of her husband going. But again, we got to give her time. And when she's ready, she's ready. In the meantime, we have to do whatever we can to support her during these very difficult times of overcoming and just dealing with the grief and everything else that she must be going through. The Democrats, what I would recommend that they do is just go silent on this. There's really nothing positive that can come from any kind of criticism at this point. Get into all these debates about whether Charlie was a racist and what he said or didn't say. I think for the Democrats, the best thing to do is just punt and move on. Because, look, I don't think it makes a lot of sense for them to be criticizing Charlie or anything he said. I think that's all in the past right now. And I think the wisest thing for the Democrats to do is just move on and go in a different direction and talk about other things. So again, my message to the Democrats is move on and stop talking about this, stop criticizing this, stop saying, well, the Democrats or the Republicans were the first one to do something. Get over that as to who threw the first rock, or who threw the first stone. Just get over that. And let's deal with the reality that there's a grieving widow with a couple of children, and that's what our conversation, that's what our focus should be, and forget all this stuff about, I heard that there were like 58 Democrats who didn't vote for a resolution in the Congress supporting him. That's insane. When they had those 2 Democrats killed in Minnesota, every Republican voted for that resolution. I mean, we got to get to a point in the country where we can put the politics on the side and deal with, something like this. Shouldn't be very controversial to vote against the shooting of anybody. In other words, if you shoot somebody, it shouldn't be very controversial to vote for a resolution condemning the killing of a young man who has a young widow and 2 kids. I mean, it shouldn't be controversial. I don't know what exactly some of these Democrats were thinking, or they were saying, well, the resolution didn't say this. I have not read the resolution, but I'm pretty sure that it was a pretty standard resolution. And just because you voted against the shooting of Charlie Kirk, that doesn't mean that you support what he's saying. In other words, you can disagree with Charlie Kirk and still, say that the shooting of Charlie Kirk was an awful thing. I'm sure those 2 members of the Minnesota legislature who were killed, I'm sure there were many Republicans, even legislators from Minnesota, who didn't agree with them. But, at some point we have to put politics aside and see the big picture. And the big picture is that political assassinations, this climate, this toxic climate of just criticizing each other is not going to be good for the country, and it's not going to be good for anybody. You don't want to live in a country where everything is so toxic when it comes to the politics. I just don't think that helps anybody. So rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. And I think all of us should be thinking about Erica and those kids, and let's put some of the politics aside for the time being. Well, I understand from talking to or just reading media reports that Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez, the representative from New York, is thinking about running for president. Maybe she is. Maybe she is. Now, I think what she's really interested in is running for the U.S. Senate. I think that that's what she's really thinking about. I think she's thinking about challenging Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, in the next election there in New York. I think that's what she's thinking, or is, having a primary against Senator Schumer. Frankly, that would be a smarter move politically. That would be a much easier uh, objective for her to reach than to run for president. I don't think she's ready to run for president. I think this is a woman who needs a little bit more seasoning, if you will, in the federal government before she runs for president. But I do believe that she may be running for the Senate in New York. I'm not exactly sure when Chuck Schumer's term is up. I think it may very well be in 26 or 28. But I really believe that that's what she should be concentrating on if she wants to eventually get into national politics. I think if that's her objective, to be someday considered a presidential candidate, that I think it would be better for her to go into the Senate. And look, I don't know whether she can beat him in a primary or not, but the way that when you see the influence of this left movement in the Democrat Party, you may have a mayor of New York City who comes from that group. When you see the influence of this group in the Democrat Party, I think the idea that she defeats Chuck Schumer in the primary for senator is actually quite real. In fact, Chuck Schumer has to be feeling it because Schumer is going further and further to the left all the time. I mean, he must feel that he has to defend himself against somebody like Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez in the primaries because he's going further and further to the left. I mean, this is a man who, was more of a centrist Democrat, and now he's moving in the direction where he opposes everything that Trump is doing. Everything is about Trump. And I think that it's about time, that he, I should say, if not, it's about time. But I think if Ocasio-Cortez is thinking about challenging him, this may be the time to do it. So that's what I think is more likely to happen, that she's going to run for the U.S. Senate in New York, not for president. I sincerely don't think the Democrats would nominate her for the Senate. I just don't think. I think there would be great opposition within the party if that's what happens. Well, let's talk a little bit about these licenses that the broadcast stations get. Look, these licenses, they only go to broadcast stations. They don't go to the cable stations. But what these licenses call for is for the networks who are broadcasting these shows to be slightly more responsible, or at least try to keep a fair balance. And the problem with a lot of the programming coming out of the networks, whether it's The View on ABC, even the way that some of the moderators behaved during the presidential debate and the vice presidential debate, and now, of course, this show, Jimmy Kimmel, is that everything seems to be against Trump. The programming, the positions are always in one direction. And that's okay. I mean, you have a right to feel that way. You have a right to say whatever you want to say on The View or on that night show that Jimmy Kimmel is running. But the networks or the affiliates of ABC also have a right to say, you know what, we don't, we're not fond of this coverage because this is impacting our bottom line in some of the affiliate markets. They have a right to say that too, which is, I think, what happened with Jimmy Kimmel, where a lot of the affiliates said, we're not going to carry him anymore after that. So I understand Jimmy Kimmel is coming back. I don't know. Frankly, it doesn't matter because I don't watch the show. But if he is coming back, I hope he has a little bit more common sense and realizes that if he wants to keep that show beyond December, I guess the contract is coming up in December, that he's going to have to get away from all this political stuff and try to get back into comedy, because that's where he should be. He should be in comedy or entertainment. That's what those shows used to do, and get away from the toxic politics against Trump all the time and against Trump all the time. Look, he's entitled to that point of view, But he's got to understand that when you go to those political extremes, what happens is your audience drops off, because I'm not watching it. Lots of people are not watching it because, after a while, all these attacks on Trump, honestly, they become boring. It's boring, these people. That's all they do is talk about Trump. After a while, you go, wait a minute. Don't you have something else to say? Can't your writers come up with a better joke than always attacking Trump? So I think, honestly, I think that there has to be, these shows are going to have to take a look at themselves and say, what is it that we want? Do we want to be anti-Trump, or do we want to appeal to a broader base? And if they want to appeal to a broader base, they're going to have to get different programming. If they want to be against Trump, hey, that's fine with me. They can be against Trump. I'm not going to watch it. And apparently a lot of Americans are not watching it either. Because, as I said, when you watch a program that is all about Trump, and all they do is talk about Trump, and all they do is talk about Trump, that may appeal to some people. I'm not denying that. But it doesn't appeal to a large enough group of people to keep your show on the air. And that's, I believe, the message they need to hear. And I think the advertisers get it. I really do. Because the advertisers are not in the business of selling their products or services to only one group of people. They want to sell it to the whole country. And when you're only appealing to half of the country, well, the advertisers are not going to pay you money just for that purpose. So anyway, I hope that cooler heads prevail and common sense returns. In the meantime, I'm not going to watch Jimmy Kimmel. And that's just the way it goes. Well, thanks for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.